Good afternoon, I'm your host Brian Buckmar, and happy Valentine's Day to you all. First, let's begin with what we've seen so far. In the Pardon case, he was found guilty of all charges. If you remember, that's the case out of Ohio. Pardon was found guilty of viciously stabbing the victim in that case. Now, the sentencing is scheduled for Tuesday at 9 a.m. The death penalty is still on the table. Next, we have the Hess case. This is the case out of Texas where he was charged with shooting 12 bullets into a car, striking the victim in the passenger seat. However, he was found not guilty, acquitted of all charges. So there will be no sentencing. He's a free man. He is not guilty. Next, we have the Burns case. Now, the Jerry Burns case out of Iowa, that is continuing live. We're going to jump back into that court sometime later in the program. If you want to check it out, go to lawandcrime.com to see live gavel-to-gavel coverage there. And of course, last but not least, we have the Harvey Weinstein case that is occurring right here in Manhattan, just a few blocks from our studio. The prosecution began their closing arguments earlier today after the prosecution had done them yesterday, after the defense, had done them yesterday. And of course, the law in New York State is that the defense goes first, the prosecution goes later, and there is no rebuttal for either side. However, I would anticipate that there might be a presser of one of the defense attorneys after the prosecution's closing arguments to give their opinion of what the prosecution gave us. Now, Jesse Weber is there live. Definitely check out his Twitter, check out Law and Crime's Twitter for live updates. We'll likely hear from him when they get a lunch break later on in the segment. But first, let's start off with Gloria Allred. After the defense gave their closing arguments, she took to outside of 100 Center Street to give her impressions of what she heard and saw.
What they mean by the alternate reality. So the alternate reality to me would be the defense basing its arguments largely on rape myths. To me, that's an alternate reality in light of the expert testimony by Dr. Ziv. That it's the reality is there is continued communication by many rape victims with the person they accuse of crimes against them. The reality is that often there is no report to the police or to a doctor, and sometimes not to friends for a long time. This is the reality. This is not a myth. This is the reality that exists, and it doesn't mean that a crime did not happen. So I do see Dr. Ziv's testimony as being extremely important, and I do hope that the prosecution reminds the jury of that tomorrow, of that very important expert testimony. But that's always the case. I mean, the defense always tries to portray itself as the real victim. And so we'll have to see if the jury buys that.
All right, so again, that's Gloria Allred speaking after the defense gave their closing arguments. Now I'm joined in studio with clinical social worker Jennifer Bohr Cuevas. I think I've got that right, yes. We also have Ann Bremner via Skype, and happy Valentine's Day to you.
Valentine's Day.
And same to you as well, Jennifer.
Happy Valentine's Day.
And we'll start with you. Prosecution is giving their closing arguments today. We heard from the defense. If you had an opportunity to hear the defense, what, if anything, did you make of their arguments and their closing statements? And what would you anticipate we're going to hear from the prosecution today?
Well, I think the defense did a really nice job. I mean, they're basically saying he's like Tiger Woods. These are consensual, that he's, like Gloria Allred just said, that he's like a victim, and that there's no case here. I mean, it was basically career advancement for the purported victims, and he's somebody that is not exactly appropriate, but he's not a criminal. So the prosecution has to come back and really, I think, combat a lot of what's been raised by the defense in terms of consent, continuing conduct that's friendly to him, lack of some kind of evidence that they've been assaulted after the fact. They've got a lot to work with in the defense, but the prosecution needs to basically deal with that and then just go strong with lack of consent, lack of consent, lack of consent.
And then Jennifer, similar question, and brings up a good point. There were a lot of anecdotes, a lot of analogies that were used. One of my favorite when I was in court, Donna Rotuna was talking about how important the emails were and saying that if you were if you were kidnapped by someone and then you later emailed and said, hey, I love that vacation, or if someone had stole your watch and there was an email later on and said, oh, I'm hoping you're enjoying the watch that I gave you. She said that's very important about the emails. So what did you make of the defense's arguments with all of these emails, all of this back and forth, and what do you anticipate from the prosecution?
Mm-hmm. What I was able to get from reading the testimony of Dr. Ziv, who was the expert witness for the prosecution, was that she was able to demystify some of the rape myths that occur. And those rape myths are that women don't always call the police right after they are assaulted. The assaults happen at about an 85% level by people that the women know, and that it is possible to maintain contact with the person that has sexually assaulted you. So what I forecast is that the jury is going to have to debate whether these women were sort of living out what these rape myths are, or if they were and sort of compartmentalizing their feelings about the rape and coexisting with them so that Harvey Weinstein wouldn't ruin their careers. And I feel like the defense is going to try to challenge that as these ladies trying to have a relationship with him, a consensual, mutual relationship with him.
So Jennifer, while I have you here, I have to ask you this because you are our clinical social worker here, and as a public defender, I think we have a lot of overlap. One of the challenges I think I see here is not so much, it's like you said, demystifying the myth. Speak to how hard it is to take a person or persons, because they have 12 people there, who have like this rooted belief in this is what rape victims do. This is how they're supposed to act. And then in 14 days, 15 days, the prosecution is supposed to completely change their entire beliefs. Can you talk about the difficulties of educating and demystifying people in that way?
Yes, I think that pop psychology is the reason why people are able to develop the preconceived beliefs that they have about anything. So I think Dr. Ziv's role was going to be very important in terms of showing people or teaching the jury what the nuances of rape psychology are, so that they can make an informed vote when they come together to decide the verdict.
Now, Anne, from a legal perspective, I've been going back and forth with other lawyers, and I would love to hear your opinion. I thought it would have been more persuasive to have Dr. Ziv later on in the trial, where the doctor could have been able to pick from some of the testimony from the victims and the Molyneux witnesses to say, hey, when a woman says X, Y, Z, that's signs of a rape victim, and this is me demystifying it. But because of the order, I thought that it was less powerful because she couldn't pick from the testimony. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree 110%. If you can put that together with all the anecdotal evidence from the direct examination of those victims, it's far more powerful. And I think in a vacuum, it's counterintuitive to most of us. You know, you've just been raped and you're friendly and you say, I love you and I would like to get together, and you see him again and everything else. Those are the defenses that we usually hear. And so how can someone come around and basically say, no, flip it on its head and really what you think is wrong?
Yeah, the other thing too that I thought was maybe a misstep, Anne, by the defense, I didn't hear any questions from Dr. Ziv about asking, so what are signs that a woman was not a rape victim, to see if those signs might have been present in the victims, or alleged victims, I apologize, or the Molyneux witnesses, because right now, I'm curious myself, and maybe Jennifer, you can answer this in a second, but Anne, I thought that was a misstep why that question wasn't asked.
I know, and I was curious about the same thing, because you're basically telling us that everything that would be a defense to a rape case, everything that would indicate there was not a rape, is meaningless. Really, it is consistent with being a rape victim. But we didn't hear the other evidence, which I think you wanted to hear, I wanted to hear, and I think all your viewers probably wanted to hear.
Well, we've got Jennifer here. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but we'll take a hack at it. I understand, and I believe wholeheartedly. I'm demystified. as it terms to rape culture. But then the inverse should be true too, that there should be signs that say, well, this is not a sign of a rape victim. Are there such signs?
I think what you're asking is, are there signs that somebody may be faking it? And I think with this collection of women, that's sort of in the mix there, because these women are actresses or are people who were up and coming in Hollywood. So I know that that was sort of tested in the trial, but I really think, in my opinion, that they were just going to stick to showing what trying to make the comparisons between between the rape myths, the compartmentalization that women can do, and compare and contrast them with what a real relationship or mutual relationship was going to look like.
Exactly. Well, like I said, we're going to hopefully hear from Jesse Weber during the lunch break, and we can see how the prosecution actually tied this all together. It's going to be very fascinating. Make sure you're back here after this break.